Emotions Matter, brought to you by Emaww.com. That's EMAWW.com, your solution for emotional intelligence. Welcome to the Emotions Matter podcast. Our special guest on this episode is Lisette Schuitemaker. Lisette has long observed similarities between herself and other eldest daughters. After studying the classics, she went into communications, working first for a large bank, then setting up and running her own agency. After selling this business, she obtained a BSc in Brennan Healing Science and ran a private practice as a life coach. She sat on the board of several Dutch and European charities and currently serves as chair of the Center for Human Emergence in the Netherlands and the Firstborn Foundation in Scotland. She combines her psychological insights with her writing experience. The Eldest Daughter Effect is her third book. Her book, Alight, is about alighting the train of negative thoughts and feelings about yourself and knowing you are light already. Welcome, Lisette. It's great having you on the Emotions Matter podcast.
Thank you, John. I'm delighted to be here.
Terrific. The first line I've read about you is living light and living lightly. Could you please explain this philosophy that you have about life?
Yes, I'm happy to explain that. One point I was talking to somebody who came to see me in my private practice, and he was rather glum, and he said, and the weather is also so bad, the sun isn't shining. And I said, you're wrong. Of course the sun is shining. And he kind of looked at me and said, what? Look outside. I said, no, the sun is always shining. It's just there's some clouds in front of it. And we've known for years. So it's a language problem. The sun is shining, there's some clouds. And I think very often in our personal lives also, there's clouds in our emotions, in our thoughts, in kind of enemy making or insecurities we have. And then those are like clouds that we hang in front of the natural light that we are. So I'm, you'd say, in the business of consciousness, but consciousness is such a abstract notion. But when I talk about I'm in the business of light of consciousness, then I can kind of shift back from where I can be in my personality with all the ups and downs and responses to whatever happens, and I can just shift back into the light and see my emotional upheavals as clouds in the sky that don't necessarily need to cloud my light. That's the idea.
That's brilliant. Well, I tell you, you have a quite interesting background, and you've worked for a bank, had your own business, had a private practice as a life coach, and now you're doing humanitarian work. Talk to us a little bit about that path that you've taken.
Yeah, life is a journey of discovery, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Because looking back, I can really see that now as chair of the Firstborn Foundation and the Center for Human Emergence as one activity and book writing as another activity, that's where my life has led me. But of course, I didn't know that when I was 25 and kind of go, my goodness, who am I? And how am I going to find my way in this world? And I worked at a bank, but I worked in a PR department. And I was very motivated there. I used to say to the men in their beautiful suits in the beautiful offices, I said, there's only one time I heard where this bank is really going. That was when I came from my job interview. Now I've been working here for a year. Where are you going with this bank? How do you want me to develop my capacities and talents? I can come with you. It was a time actually when organizations discovered, and that's hard to imagine these days with all our devices and so much communication going on, but organizations never really talked to their staff, to their workers about their vision or their strategy. So I kind of rode that wave. And then I thought, if you work at a bank, you really ought to be a banker. If I'm a communicator, I want to work somewhere where communication is the bread and butter. After some freelancing, I started my own agency, and the bank actually became my biggest customer. Mm-hmm. We did some fashion and magazines, but mostly we did internal communication within organizations, as that was really a budding profession. And after a few years, I actually had kind of a mind opening and started to wonder about what these organizations I was working for. I was really a bit of, his master's voice, actually, of the board, and what they were up to. And I started to get more interested in our communication within people, not so much within organizations. And so I enrolled in the really excellent Barbara Brennan School of Healing and did a 4-year study to obtain a bachelor's, and then started my own practice as a healer and a life coach. But it was great that through that first 15, 20 years training, I had learned to write. So I had that, and then I had this more knowledge of our inner workings. And then I'd also joined a network of companies that wanted, this was the mid-90s, where socially responsible awareness started to rise. So I became a member of a network, social venture network, and it was a very exciting time. And before I knew it, I found myself on the board, and I was a bit surprised, actually. But and I've been in a few charities and international and national organizations, and now there's 2 left.
You currently serve as the chair of the Center for Human Emergence in the Netherlands and the Firstborn Foundation in Scotland. Well, tell us something about that experience.
Well, the Firstborn Foundation, I came there first in 1998. And right as I stepped in there, I knew I had found my spiritual home. I kind of recognized that place as the outer manifestation of my inner life. Firstborn Foundation is a community. It's a business because we run trainings. It's about 120 people meditating together, living together, cooking together, giving trainings together, organizing conferences together, having built one of the first eco-villages together. I really love going there. So for me, it is a total privilege when they asked me to be on the board in 2002. And then I was asked to be chair in 2014. So that's really a privilege to be able to serve in that capacity.
Do you think the humanitarian work you're doing drives the success you have in professional life, or is it the other way around?
Well, that's a really good question, John. And I have never quite framed it to myself like that. And the first thing that comes to mind is, 2 wings of a butterfly. Or maybe in my case, it's more 2 wings of a bumblebee that zooms from one flower to the next and kind of crossways. Many eldest daughters, like I'm the eldest of 4, are kind of busybodies. Now, I know that that's not a real kind word, but I can't find another word. But we like to stick our nose in other people's business, a bit as if they are our younger siblings. And so we kind of look down a little bit from our high and lofty position as the eldest and tell them what they can do better or differently. And we have all kinds of ideas about their lives. And we've been doing their whole life. So I think that's a bit of what you do when you're on a board. And I love to be able to volunteer my time in those places of what you call humanitarian work. And I have certainly grown so much as a person through collaborating with other people on those boards, especially Firstborn, also the Center for Human Emergence, which we founded in 2005, thinking, if the world gets more and more complex, which it is doing, then one way of thinking about that is, oh my goodness, we need to get back to when life was simple. But another one is going, when we move forward, we have to have other ways of governance, of decision making, of organizing ourselves as a business or as a charity to be able to handle that huge complexity of life these days. So the Center for Human Emergence has been my practice ground, and many of those things I can now bring into my work in the Firstborn Foundation, and it all informs my writing. So it really is, 2 wings. So I think it's mutually beneficial. One drives the other, or drives to one, but it's really like the eternity symbol, where it's a cross-pollination all the time, actually.
Speaking of, you mentioned you're an eldest daughter, and your book, The Eldest Daughter, is actually talking about how firstborn children really do excel. How did you start noticing this pattern, and really what does it tell us?
Yeah, so I noticed the pattern, eldest daughters being more similar in a way than we are to our siblings. We're more similar to each other than we are to our siblings. And the story is, I really see this. I was on my bike because I'm Dutch. I live in Amsterdam, so we bike around a lot. And I was to my cousin, and I thought, why is it we get along so well? Is it only because we're family, or something else? And then I remembered we're the eldest of four. And we spoke about it that evening as we sat over dinner together. And ever since, I've kind of had this kind of track going of, oh, that's an eldest daughter. Oh, and then it turned out my best friends, my best girlfriends, all three of them are eldest daughters. And I didn't pick that because of it, but it turns out that we recognize something in one another. And groundbreaking research by Fei Pu in England, which shows that eldest daughters are excel. And she named also like Christine Lagarde and J.K. Rowling and Oprah Winfrey and Sheryl Sandberg and Beyonce, Angela Merkel as examples. I think, it tells us something about the effect of what is called being dethroned, because as the first child, we are the center of the universe of our parents. We're a miracle. We are, of course, every child is, but the first miracle is maybe a bit bigger than the next miracle. And so everything is about us until that fateful day when there's another baby all of a sudden in our mother's arms. And we kind of panic. And we go like, oh my God, what do we do? And so I think part of our success of wanting to perform well, of excelling, is a bit of a defense, because if we are good, if we perform well, that's kind of our ticket to still be loved, to still be able to stay in the home with our parents and cherished. So it's a bit of a defensive action. And then, of course, it gets us praise. It gets us appreciation. It's nice to know that our parents don't need to worry about us because, yes, we've done our homework. Yes, we come back with the good grades. So that's what we do. And we also want to show that we're really a better person than that crybaby crib that can do absolutely nothing. So we kind of go out of our way to show, how good we are and how big we are already. And so that's kind of a strategy. Then there's also research, actually American research from the National Bureau of Economic Research, no less, that says parents are also strategic. Because once we go to school, kind of parents want like a stamp of approval that they're doing well with their first child. So we need to perform well. That's kind of their nerves. But also they want to set a standard with us. Because if they're lax with us, their image with the other children will never be able to say to the other children, you have to do your homework. So with their first child, they really drive us to do well. And then they can relax a bit more with the next ones.
Very insightful. Very insightful. Well, let me ask you something. In your opinion, then, what role did the emotion of love, along with how much they received from their parents, as you were speaking about the parents, had to do with the amazing results that the firstborns were showing?
Yeah. We had all the love. When we were the only ones, the eldest had all the love coming to us. And so then we need to learn to share. And I don't think that's so easy. A second born or third or whatever, they've always been in a shared economy. But for the eldest, you have to learn. And so I think there is a lingering sense in us that we have to deserve the love, and that when we do well, we will be loved. And that's part of the drive and ambition. That is still there. So that's, in a way, a little sad. And having said that first time alone with the parents, whether it's a year or 5 years or however long, is also really, really very precious. And I myself actually noticed, my father has now passed, but when I was with my parents by myself, I became a different person. And I just loved that kind of sacred triangle of the three of us when we were still together before the others came in. Yeah.
What about the expression of the firstborn's love to their siblings? How does that factor in your life and your life experiences?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's another great question. So there's love between siblings and there's rivalry, right? And the Darwinists actually say we all want to be the only one for our parents. So they kind of stress the rivalry. But there is also such love. And I think for the first child, that also comes with a sense of wanting to protect. We organized a research day for our book and had 120 eldest daughters come together and take workshops and tell their stories. And we asked them to send in pictures that were kind of typical moments of their younger years. And we got all these pictures of an eldest daughter with her arm, protectingly around her younger sibling. And my brother was not such a person. My brother and I have been rivals all along, and he is not the kind of person you would do your arm around and protect him, not at all. But my co-author, she had a baby sister, and so she knows this very, very well, this kind of protectiveness, and that is part of the love, and that is also at some point, of course, in your life, you have to let go of that a little bit. Mm-hmm. Because then you're not like older sister, younger sister, but you become peers. But even then, I've spoken to women who say, I can't help it. I'm over 50 and I still kind of watch out for my siblings. Yeah, it's just, the extra eye has been installed.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the extra eye. I love that. So you've coined a phrase. I watched a TED Talk that you did, and you coined a phrase called the birth order blind spot. Give our listeners some perspective on this. And do you see the emotion of desire kind of playing a part in the roles that are taken based on birth order?
Yeah, so what I call the birth order blind spot is when we are responding to a completely innocent bystander as if they are our sibling. Because we see in them, that sibling with that particular behavior. And our very early childhood rivalry or, as you say, fulfillment of desires is just being triggered. But we're usually blind to that. So we really believe that person is wanting something from us or wants us to do something we don't want. And we go into, we have huge stages in our mind, huge stages at which whole dramas, Shakespearean dramas are being played there. And, the other person has no clue, or they're projecting something onto us. But that's what I call the birth order blind spot. That once we know more about typical characteristics and are more aware of how it plays in us, and also the desire. I don't know exactly what you mean by desire, but what it triggers in me is the desire to still be kind of the best child of our parent. Mm-hmm. I've been having some conversations about that. How in our later years, even when we're in our 30s, 40s, 50s. I'm in my 60s now. Uh-huh. I think it is over now. But in my 50s, I was still I wanted actually to be the best child of my parent. And I think that those are very early kind of instinctual feelings, but they're very strong. And that's why it's so good to be aware of them.
Mm-hmm. So I think the key here is you've got some very distinct desires, activities, emotions that come from being the firstborn. Then you have the middle child or the third or the fourth child, like you explained during the TED Talk, which was incredible. Let's talk about what advice then would you give to younger siblings? I mean, how should they make up for what I would consider maybe a disadvantage that they have within the family.
There is such a disadvantage, but they have so many other advantages because as the eldest, becoming kind of responsible, dutiful, thoughtful children, we kind of can look at our other siblings and go like, how do they do things so easily? Like the middle child, it's very often a middle child. They see one side, they see the other, and they often will find themselves also in roles of being negotiators or mediators, or somehow, because they can step in other people's shoes, and also. I said Darwinists. Charles Darwin, who was the fifth of six, and at some point he wrote a letter to his son, and he said, "I'm really puzzled here. What makes a man a discoverer of undiscovered things?" Because he thought, "I'm not the cleverest person on this earth. There are people way cleverer than I am, and yet I am propelled into kind of proposing these whole new ideas about evolution." So in his line of thinking, there came, almost 100 years later, more than 100 years later, came Frank Soloway, who was a researcher. And he said, I want to answer that question that he posed. And he read through biographies of hundreds of historical figures, mostly men then, of course. He said the first child kind of wants to uphold the rules. So we're in this little triangle with our parents. We know how things go in the household, and we want to teach that to the baby. But the baby is like, yes, but if I'm like you, I'm not going to be me. So I need to break that open. I'm going to take a niche that is different from you. So they often are. The book, Soloway's book, is called Born to Rebel. So they're born to rebel. They're born to kind of go, no. I'm not going to live by those rules. So they are often more original, more groundbreaking, more daring, more adventurous than the eldest. So they have great advantages. And then, the youngest, I don't know, maybe these T-shirts sometimes on the internet that comes around. Is this T-shirt for the eldest is I make the rules. And for the middle is I break the rules. And for the youngest is rules? They don't apply to me. Because the youngest is, especially in bigger families, of course, they are often the jokers of the family, because everybody has interesting stories and has louder voices. So they pull a funny face and, they attract all the attention all of a sudden away from the older siblings. And also they kind of are like these little scientists, social scientists, kind of looking up and seeing the dynamics between their siblings and their parents. And so they're very emotionally intelligent, much more emotionally intelligent than the first one who has no example to kind of learn from and has to kind of pioneer their way in life. So I think each place in the birth order comes with very specific advantages.
So do you find that there is a difference in the firstborn, a difference between males and females in firstborns?
I think there are, but I haven't really studied firstborn men. But one thing that happened when we organized our research day, the Eldest Daughter Day, we had said we want women who are really firstborns in their family, not the eldest daughter. Like I have three brothers and then, I'm the eldest daughter. We said it's really different if you are also the first child. And then there were all these women who approached us and they said, but Lisette, I have an elder brother, but he doesn't do it.
Right.
As if they were talking about like a broken vacuum cleaner. So like, he doesn't do it. And they would look us in the eye and kind of go like, you understand what we mean. And then we were like, yeah, we think we understand what you mean. It's like he wears the crown, he wears the name, he is still, the heir apparent. There is still, even in this day and age, something about that. But then when it comes to cooking the Christmas dinner or, getting the family together to do a song for a sibling's wedding or whatever, then it's usually the woman who does that. So within the family, I think the eldest daughter plays a different role than the eldest son.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also books about Dr. Lehman has written books about eldest children, and he says, most of the presidents of the U.S. have been eldest children, not this one though, but most of them have been eldest sons, and the first man on the moon were eldest sons, and so there is that kind of serious streak in the men as well.
Interesting. Just as a personal experience, since I'm a middle child, my older brother, who was the firstborn, was completely a renegade. I mean, he was like the thirdborn, zero respect for any authority, didn't want to follow any rules, was completely a renegade. And then, of course, as he got older, that all changed. And as you actually explained earlier, the middle child becomes the mediator between the family, which is exactly the role I ended up being in. And of course, as you said, my youngest sister, who is the third, she actually, no rules. It was all about her, and that was the way it was. Well, what I was going to ask you was, in today's society, now we have this generation called millennials. Do you find that generation acts differently, whether it's a male or a female firstborn, and I'm assuming you're studying the females? Do you find there's a difference between that generation today and baby boomer generation or Gen X or Gen Y? I mean, have you found some differences between the generations in this study that you're doing?
Yeah, I've never really looked at millennials as such, but one difference that we saw immediately is women a bit older than me, so maybe in their 70s, usually came from larger families. And so they were very much like the second mother. Somebody said the fifth child was just handed to me and said, my mother said, here, she's yours. Or, during the weekend, they had to help clean the house or run the farm or cook for the family or whatever. And I think, a bit later on, that was already less. One thing is, those larger families have disappeared for a bit with the younger women. When I talk to them and I kind of, this is an eldest. So I ask, are you by any chance an eldest daughter? And they will say, well, if I weren't the eldest, I'd be the youngest. So the middle children like you are on the verge of being extinct. It's a sad thing. And of course, not across the board, but there's so many two-child families. And what I think is that society is more individualized. And I think also within families, children are being treated more like individuals, the individuals that they are, and not like the bunch of children that they were. But I haven't really studied millennials enough to know that I can give you a good answer.
Well, I tell you what, we have a question. We have a question from one of our listeners, and it was sent actually a few weeks ago, and we've kind of been waiting for the perfect guest to answer it. So the question comes from Jane, and she's a 19-year-old art student from Paris, and her question is, I've been living in a shadow of my older sister for my whole life. I feel like whatever I do, it will not be good enough, and everyone's expecting me to follow her path, which I do not want. How do I rid myself of that pressure?
That's a lovely question. And it makes me think of one of the books I read for our book, The Eldest Daughter Effect. And this is a book by a German psychologist called Irina Prekop. And she wasn't German. She was born in the Czech Republic. And her sister was perfect. Her sister was beautiful. Her sister was good in school, was popular. And so little Irina also found, how can I ever to compete? She used to feel she lived in a shadow. Her sister studied medicine, married another doctor, had two beautiful daughters, and just lived that life. Whereas Irina fled to Germany, established herself there, wrote books, had a kind of adventurous life. And even though she was a very sophisticated psychologist, there was always still this kind of rage against her older sister. until she was in her late 60s. She was almost pensioned off. And then all of a sudden she started to think, how must life has been for my sister? How is it actually for my sister to grow up with me? And so she engaged in a conversation with her sister, who was already over 70. And her sister said, I always felt that, I needed to be someone and you were free to do as you pleased. Our parents were way freer with you than they were with me. I've always felt very lonely because I felt I was so conventional and you were having such an adventurous life. And so these two women got to talk. So my advice to Jane would be, don't wait until you're 70. Talk to your sister. Talk to your sister and ask her how it is for her to be a firstborn. And, share your fears with her. Maybe tell her, you love her, you admire her, but how you struggle to find your own way and to step out of the shadow that she casts. And maybe you can enlist her help in making this clear to your parents that you're both, very different people. One is not a carbon copy of the other. And what joy to have two daughters who are seeking their own lives and forging their own lives in their own ways. So that would be what I say to your listener.
Very amazing. Great insights on that answer. Terrific. Well, I'm sure Jane will find that to be certainly something she can jump into with her older sibling. Before we run out of time, what I'd like to do is make sure the listeners have the ability to find out where they can read or hear more from you. Specifically, are there any major milestones that you plan to achieve soon that you'd like us and our listeners to know about?
Yes. I've just sent in the manuscript of another book. I had a deadline on February 28th, and I'm an eldest daughter, so of course I made the deadline. That's what we eldest daughters do. And that's going to be another book out in October on negative self-talk, how we can turn negative self-talk into a positive present and live our gifts. More is that we are organizing a retreat for eldest daughters only, firstborn women only, at the Findhorn Foundation in Scotland. It starts pretty soon, Saturday, March 18, for 3 days. And your listeners are still welcome. If they would want to come, if this speaks to their heart, they can find me through theeldestdaughtereffect.com website, and I would be happy to send them information or greet them on the Scottish shores.
That sounds like a terrific event. So, Lisette, I want to sincerely thank you for being my guest and sharing such amazing insights.
Thank you. It was a joy to talk to you, John.
You can find out more about Lisette and her work at her website, www.eldestdaughtereffect.com. This is John, and I look forward to having you join me on another episode of the Emotions Matter podcast.